How's it going, everyone? In this video, we're going to be talking about constraints.
Last time we introduced the concept of float, sometimes referred to as slack, and how it helps us understand how to prioritize our work. You can see here that the path with 0 days of float is the critical path, as it is the series of tasks with the lowest slack in our schedule. And you can see it is currently driving our completion milestone out to 12/5/22. But what if I want to have my wedding on November 15th? This date of 11/15 is what we would call a constraint or a deadline, as it is constraining our schedule to finish on 11/15. This type of constraint is present in nearly all schedules you'll work with, so it's crucially important to understand how they affect schedules. While the float values we can see here allow us to understand how we should prioritize the various tasks relative to each other, we also need to know how they relate to the overall constraint we just discussed. So how do we apply a constraint? There are two ways. The most straightforward, and I would argue most useful way, would be to add a deadline to the milestone we want to constrain. So for our schedule here, I want to apply a constraint to my wedding day milestone. So to add a constraint, just double click on the task, move to the Advanced tab, and come here to the Deadline drop-down option. So I'm going to click the drop-down and select a date. Hit OK. Now that we have our deadline applied, what changes have occurred? Firstly, notice the light diamond that has appeared in the Gantt chart. This diamond represents the deadline you just added. Notice that we are late, we are further to the right in the Gantt chart. The addition of this constraint also introduces us to the idea of negative slack. Taking that idea further, any schedule that does not have any constraints placed on it will have a critical path of 0 days. Only by introducing a deadline that we must hit can we start being late, which makes sense. We can clearly see now that some of our tasks have negative slack. This tells us that our current schedule is late to our deadline, and it tells us the tasks that are causing this, and we can see these here. The second way of constraining a schedule is by applying what's known as a finish no later than constraint. To do this, first we need to go back to our milestone and remove our deadline. So let's go that, double click, and I will delete this value and hit OK. You can see our float values have gone back to what they were before, no negative values. Now to add a finish no later than constraint, double click on the task again, go to the Advanced tab, and you'll see here Constraint Type. Go to the drop-down and select Finish no later than. The task cannot finish later than a certain date. It holds it physically in place. So let's select that and select our date once again. We can see right away our negative float value has reappeared, but also we can see the difference between a deadline and a constraint. If we look at our milestone in the Gantt chart, we can see that our milestone has been physically held at 11:15. This causes an issue when looking at it visually, as our discrete tasks actually go further out to the right than our milestone. There are reasons we might use this idea of physically holding a date, which I'll discuss in a later video, but for now, the deadline is the preferred option when running critical path analysis to a milestone. That's all I wanted to go over in this video. Thank you all for watching. Next time, I'll be diving deeper into how we analyze these float values and how we may organize the data for easier consumption.